You probably don't think much about the apps on your phone. They're meant to make life easier, connecting with friends, sharing a funny moment, checking in with loved ones. But what if one of those apps, something so ordinary, became the very thing that made you question your safety? What if a simple feature, like Snap Map, which shows where you are, gave someone a window into your life, someone who shouldn't have access to that? Before we dive into the horrifying details of this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to DR Nightmare for more real-life tales that will leave you in shock. This is exactly what happened to Sarah, a high school junior, when she accepted a friend request from someone she barely knew. Someone she didn't realize was watching her every move, from the hallways at school to her own bedroom. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, it did. It all started with a random request from a kid she barely noticed. But when Sarah checked her Snap Map one night, things started to spiral out of control. Someone was using that map to track her, someone who knew exactly where she was, where she'd been, and where she was going. And, worse still, someone was using it to find her, inside her own home. This is Sarah's story, and it will make you rethink how safe you are, even with the apps that seem harmless. Sarah lived a relatively normal life for a teenager in a small town. She was an average student, somewhat popular but not overly so, and had a tight-knit group of friends she spent most of her time with. It was the kind of school where everyone knew everyone, and rumors spread fast. Her social life revolved around Snapchat. It was the app that everyone used. It was where the group chat was, where people shared memes, and where you showed off your weekend adventures. Snap Map was a feature she had enabled for a long time. It felt harmless at the time. Her friends could see where she was, but she didn't think much of it. It wasn't like she was doing anything secretive. If anything, she liked letting her friends know when she was out and about. After all, it was a small town, and everyone pretty much knew everyone else. What could possibly go wrong? Sarah's world was normal. She had a few close friends, a part-time job, and a family who kept a pretty close eye on her. She wasn't one for drama or attention, but she did like to keep up with what was going on, and Snapchat was the perfect way to stay connected. At school, there was one kid that stood out for all the wrong reasons. His name was Jordan Watts. He wasn't the typical bully or outsider. He was quieter than most, a little off-putting in his mannerisms, and a little too obsessed with staying in the background. He wasn't a big social media user, at least not one who posted anything noticeable, but he was always lurking, always watching. Jordan was the kind of kid who had a lot of quiet, lingering eyes. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was often in a way that felt forced, as though he didn't quite know how to make conversation. Some of the kids in school whispered about him, but no one ever really took him seriously. They just considered him the weird kid. They didn't know much about his home life, and no one bothered to ask. Sarah had crossed paths with Jordan a few times, but they'd never spoken. She had noticed him watching her in class once or twice, but it wasn't anything unusual. Just another quiet kid in the back of the room. But that all changed the day she got a random friend request from him on Snapchat. It caught her off guard because she never even knew he had an account. She debated whether to add him or not, but, being the kind of person she was, friendly, open, she accepted the request without thinking twice. It didn't take long before the messages started coming in. The first one was a selfie, just your average, run-of-the-mill Snapchat shot. But it felt different. Jordan was sitting at his desk, looking up at the camera. His expression was blank, but there was something off about it. The caption simply read, "Hey Sarah, how's it going?" Sarah stared at the message for a moment, wondering why he was even messaging her. They hadn't spoken a word to each other in person, and now he was reaching out like they were old friends. It was a bit unsettling, but she didn't want to seem rude. She tapped back a quick response, "Hey, doing good, you?" A few minutes passed. Then came the next message, a picture. It wasn't of Jordan this time. It was a picture of the hallway at school, but the unsettling part was that the picture was taken from behind her. The camera angle suggested someone was standing right behind her, following her. The caption read, "I see you." Sarah's pulse quickened. She stared at the message, replaying the moment over and over in her head. Had she seen Jordan in the hallway? No. She had no memory of him being there. She scanned the hallway the next day, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he wasn't around. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he had been behind her, but she hadn't noticed. But that wasn't the only message she received. Later that evening, another snap came through. This one was even more disturbing. It was a video, taken from behind Sarah as she exited the lunchroom at school. The camera zoomed in as she walked through the hall, her friends chatting beside her. She didn't see Jordan. She had no idea he was following her. But the video continued, tracking her every move as she left the building, and the caption at the end read, "Cute." Sarah's heart sank. Her stomach twisted into knots. She felt the walls closing in around her. How was this even possible? Why was Jordan doing this? She almost blocked him right then and there, but hesitated. Part of her felt like maybe she was overreacting. What if he was just messing around? What if he didn't mean any harm? But the unsettling feeling gnawed at her, and she couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a headache. She tried to shake off the unease, thinking maybe it was all just some sick joke. She went about her morning routine, but as she walked to her window, she felt a chill run down her spine. Her window was wide open. She didn't remember opening it before bed. Her closet door was slightly ajar as well. She had locked everything the night before. Her room felt too cold, as if someone had been in there, watching her sleep. Her phone buzzed, and she immediately checked it. The messages from Jordan were even more disturbing now. More pictures. More evidence that he had been watching her. The first photo was a picture of the sidewalk outside her house. The second photo was of her front yard. Then, the worst one, a photo of her bedroom window. It wasn't taken from inside the house. It was taken from outside. The caption read, "Nice view." Sarah felt her blood run cold. She scrolled further, her heart pounding in her chest. There was a photo of her bedroom, taken from inside. A photo of her bed while she was still asleep, tucked under the covers. The caption was chilling, "I like watching people sleep." And then came the worst message of all, "I found you with Snap Map." Sarah froze. He was watching her through Snap Map. He had been using it to track her every move. She couldn't breathe. Every time she looked at her phone, it felt like the walls were closing in on her. The next few days were a blur of emotions for Sarah. Everything had been spinning out of control so quickly. She'd shown her parents the screenshots, the messages, the photos that Jordan had sent her. Each one felt like a blow to her sense of security, a sharp reminder that someone she barely knew, had been watching her from the shadows. Her dad, who was always the steady presence in their household, took immediate action. He didn't panic, didn't question whether to involve the authorities. It was clear to him that this wasn't just some harmless prank, it was a real threat. He picked up the phone and dialed the police. As soon as the officers arrived, Sarah's world started to shift. The police, initially skeptical of the seriousness of the case, began to understand the full scope of the situation. Sarah could feel their eyes on her as they scrolled through the disturbing messages and images. The officers took photos of the screenshots, carefully documenting every instance of Jordan's obsessive behavior. Her heart pounded in her chest. The police began their investigation into Jordan, trying to piece together what had driven him to do this. They dug into his background, and what they uncovered was even more unsettling. Jordan lived with his single mother, a woman who had a history of mental illness and neglect. The isolation in his life had been profound. His mother had been absent, both physically and emotionally, leaving Jordan to fend for himself from a young age. He had no friends, no support system, and was completely cut off from the world around him. It wasn't just that he was awkward or strange. Jordan was dealing with unresolved trauma and social disconnection that had gone unnoticed by everyone, including his schoolmates. But what shocked the officers most wasn't just the neglect. It was the unhealthy obsession Jordan had developed with Sarah. His fixation on her wasn't random. It was the product of years of isolation, loneliness, and a desperate desire for connection with someone, anyone. And Sarah, as an innocent target, became his object of fixation. He couldn't understand boundaries, couldn't process rejection. In his mind, by tracking her, watching her through Snap Map, he was doing nothing wrong. He thought he had a right to be in her life, even if she hadn't given him that right. The police quickly realized how far Jordan's obsession had gone. They found that Jordan had been tracking Sarah's every move for weeks. Using the Snap Map feature, he knew exactly where she was at all times, at school, at the store, and even in the privacy of her own home. He'd been standing outside her house late at night, watching her through her window. When he'd seen her sleeping, he took pictures from outside, getting as close to her as possible without her knowing. The chilling reality hit Sarah when she learned that Jordan had even been inside her yard. He'd crossed a line that was not just about online stalking, it was physical. He was watching her in real life. The evidence against Jordan was overwhelming. The Snap Map screenshots, the disturbing photos, and the text messages were all carefully documented. With this solid proof, the police arrested Jordan. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and attempted breaking and entering. His case was taken to juvenile court, and Sarah braced herself for the fallout. But as the case unfolded, it became clear that Jordan was going to face serious consequences. He was removed from the school, and rumors spread quickly about him. Some people said he and his mother had moved away, others whispered that he had been placed in a mental health facility, but no one really knew for sure. What was clear was that Jordan's life had been irrevocably changed, and the community had learned a painful lesson about the dangers lurking behind the screens of their everyday lives. For Sarah, the ordeal didn't just end with his arrest. The terror of knowing someone had been watching her every move, the fear that had been building with each new message and photo, lingered in her mind. She had trouble sleeping, always checking her windows and doors, wondering if Jordan would somehow show up again. Even though he was gone, the fear he'd instilled in her wasn't easy to shake. Her parents tried their best to comfort her, but the psychological toll was hard to ignore. Sarah had always felt safe in her own home, in her own skin. Now, she couldn't help but feel exposed. Her world had become a place where privacy was no longer guaranteed, and trust was something she struggled to rebuild. Now, imagine being in Sarah's shoes. What would you do if you were being watched, tracked, and terrorized by someone you barely knew? How would you react knowing that a seemingly harmless app was being used to invade your life, and that someone was so obsessed with you, they'd go to extreme lengths to watch your every move? How would you protect yourself in a world where every step can be monitored with just a click? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Snap Map is too invasive? Should there be stricter controls on how much personal information is shared through social media apps? What steps would you take to ensure your own safety, and how can we all protect ourselves in an increasingly connected world? If you found this story as chilling as we did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more disturbing true crime stories. These stories are more common than you think, and in this digital age, you never know who, or what, might be watching you. Stay aware, stay safe, and always remember, the most dangerous predators may not look the way you expect.